Hello, Baker Econ students. It is Sunday, January 16th, 2022. Happy Chiefs Sunday. Hopefully those Chiefs will get a win against the Steelers tonight. At least the probability is that they will. So for this week, you're going to be reading chapters 6 and 10. You're going to look at elasticity and demand and some ideas tied to utility theory and behavioral economics. Continue to post on your forum discussion post. I really enjoy reading those. Everybody's doing a great job. So, as I said, I'll probably respond about the other half of you this week. Give an opportunity if it's kind of get a little bit busier that school's kicked up here. So, but do know that I do read all your forum posts, and then continue to work on that final project, that common assessment. So if you have questions about that, do email me. Some of you have emailed me on that or other items. So if you want to meet via Zoom, just give me a lead time to let me know about it. So also just make sure to wrap up everything for week 2 before Sunday at midnight tonight. And other than that, have a great week, and hopefully some of you get to take a little bit of break tomorrow. At least I get off, and then it's kind of full steam ahead for me for the rest of the year. So with this week, first with chapter 6, the elasticity of demand. So we care about this as managers because we want to know that if we do raise prices, what is going to happen to total revenue? Total revenue simply just being the price times quantity. And we know that total revenues can fluctuate if we know by law of demand that as price goes up, the quantity demand goes down. So there's going to be an impact that if I do raise prices, the equation says total revenue equals P times Q. Well, we gain some from the higher price, but we may lose an offset. Well, we will lose an offset from sales, but the question is how much of an offset? And this is where we get into measuring the elasticity demand. And you're going to look at actually page 186, what's called a price, we should say a ARC price elasticity demand. It's an average between 2 points. If the reason we do this average is because if I just look at one specific point, say at one price I go from 10 units to 20 units, well, that's a 100% increase. But if I go the other direction, I go from 20 to 10, and the original was 20, even though it's a 10-unit change, it's only a 50% decrease. So we look at an average between 2 points, and these things can be calculated. If you're shopping at Hy-Vee, they have data now that scans which item, what was that price, what happens when we lower the price, what if we raise the price. Sometimes you may fill out surveys after you buy a product. They encourage you to do this, but they ask you things such as, what is your income range? What other goods did you think about buying? So they're trying to gather data to try to calculate a quantity demanded curve and ultimately an elasticity equation. I've kind of put a simplified econometrics example out there if you want to look at it about how elasticity of demand can be calculated with using multiple linear regression. So know that there are economists out there, or there are managers that do calculate elasticity demand, and that's important because we want to understand that what do we think will happen if we raise price or lower price, and the ultimate goal is to increase total revenues and then to increase profits. So with that, just an explanation of the calculation for the elasticity demand. By definition, it's the percentage change in the quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. And again, this is looking at, whenever you do this, I always like to think of doing it as label everything first. P1, P2, Q1, Q2. And then you substitute everything into the equation, and then you'll do the calculation. So with this, we have different ranges of elasticity of demand. Inelastic means it's a value between 0 and 1. So when we calculate elasticity in demand, obviously it's a negative number because opposite forces with the law of demand. But we just look at this at absolute. So if it's between 0 and 1, it's considered price inelastic. If it's equal to 1, it's considered unitary. And if it's greater than 1, we consider this elastic. So it's very responsive. That demand is very responsive to any change in price. So inelastic says if you raise price a lot, it doesn't change very much. Gasoline, if it goes up to $3.50 tomorrow, we're going to be paying it no matter what. We're not going to change in the short run how we drive and get back and forth to work. In the long run, we can find substitutes. We can take a bus maybe, we can carpool, we can walk, we can ride a bike. We'll find alternatives, but in the short run, things tend to be more inelastic. And if you think about our beloved Chiefs, if you're a Chiefs fan. I assume a lot of you are, but it's a great example of elastic demand right now. So the supply curve is perfectly inelastic. It means it's vertical, but demand curve kept shifting out. So the price of these tickets have gone quite up a lot. So demand is very inelastic. So it's a good situation for the NFL. It's a good situation for the Chiefs. The other example I always think of, if you ever buy a beer at a Chiefs game, it's about $10. You think, why would anybody pay $10 for a beer? That's like the equivalent of $240 for a case of beer. But it's the lack of available substitutes. They have you, so there's no other option. So if you want a beer, you're going to probably pay $10 for that beer. So, okay, with that, some other things that you're going to read about is called the cross price elasticity demand. Cross price elasticity says, hey, if the price of good X goes up in the denominator, what happens to the quantity demanded of good Y in the numerator? If we find that the price of Lucky Charms goes up and the quantity demanded of Magic Puffs increases, there's both a positive or a positive. It tells us that this is a substitute good. The opposite happens if the price goes up. Say the price of gasoline goes up and the quantity demanded of SUVs goes down. We know that this is a complementary good. So two goods have to coexist with one another. With that, it helps us understand a little bit better from a managerial perspective about what type of goods are we selling and what happens if we do change the price. You have to remember, like for certain industries, this is critical, especially like the airline industry. They're selling a seat on every plane. The goal is to try to get every seat sold. Every seat on that plane has a different price. For those that are very inelastic traveler, like the business traveler, versus those that are Joe leisure travel, can shop around, that has much more elastic demand. I always like to think about the Southwest fares, that it's also always they advertise $39 or $89, whatever. But you have to travel at some ridiculous time that only, someone that isn't working could probably travel at that time. Okay. With that, kind of wrap up this week with Chapter 10. With that, you're going to look at a lot of utility theory. Utility theory was actually started by Jeremy Bentham. He's kind of one of these wacky economists back from the 1700s, and actually believed you could create this machine, put it on your head. Kind of reminds me of that movie Back to the Future. What are you thinking? But you'd eat like a cheeseburger, and out would spit so many utils that could measure this. So, but we know that utility is subjective. Each individual is going to vary, but we can order and preference. What do we prefer? How do we rank certain things? What maximizes our level of happiness? So, but the idea is that given some budget constraint, which most of us have, we're going to make a choice between many goods and services, and we're going to purchase those goods and services in the hopes of maximizing our level of happiness. So obviously, as we consume more of a particular good or service, our happiness or level of satisfaction, we're going to assume, is declining. Okay, so you would almost have to lower the price if you'd want me to consume more. So what you're going to look at this idea in the theory is that this marginal utility of good X over the price of good X equal to the marginal utility of good Y over the price of good Y. It's simply saying that we're going to make choices between these bundles of goods that we consume, but there can be other variables, what we call like the income and substitution effect, that even if we're given, say, the price increases for ice cream cones compared to Big Macs, or you want to say shakes to Big Macs, we may actually change our allocation of goods and services because the relative prices have changed. And that's what you're going to read about in the textbook too. So, but do know that most individuals that are rational are going to make choices about how they're going to maximize their level of utility, if you will. Another interesting thing you're going to read about is about behavioral economics. It kind of questions whether people are truly rational with their decisions. Richard Thaler won a Nobel Prize in economics for his law's work on behavioral economics and whether people act rationally. And that's a big debate among economists. Some economists lean more that people, although some may not act rationally, in general, most people are rational. And there are other situations that Richard Thaler said that that people don't always act rationally. They don't act in their best interest, So, and there's a lot of experimental economics that they do, even at the University of Chicago, which is kind of interesting. For example, if I took you all as my students in my class, and I asked you to write down the last 2 digits of your social security number, and then I put a wine bottle in front of each of you and asked you how much would you pay for this wine bottle. What tends to happen is those with the higher social security numbers at the end are willing to pay more. It's called angry. It's just something that's presented, but it's almost like an irresistible force that's influenced you, and that's where marketing individuals or how things are presented, or my wife says that, hey, I'm saving you money with these Kohl's bucks. Um, it's something we have to think about. It's something how we present price and how we convince individuals that the good or service that we have does maximize their utility. So I think you'll find that reading interesting. But other than that, I will talk to you online. Again, about this week I get about half of you. I'll do the other half the next week. And there might be some weeks I can respond to everybody, but it just kind of varies. But if you do have any questions, do reach out to me. But otherwise, have a great week and go Chiefs. Take care.